in our squadron, VR-32, we had about 38 enlisted pilots. These guys ranged from first class to chiefs. And they were all enlisted under a special program during World War II that allowed the enlisted guys to fly, and they could deliver aircraft, or they weren't supposed to fly in combat, but they could fly rescue missions, and they could fly the helos at the air bases as an ambulance airplane. So these guys were really great, and most of the time I always flew with an enlisted guy. We had one guy that was in an F-6 and buzzed his daddy's ranch, and his daddy wasn't home, but the worker that was there didn't know, and he reported it, that the plane was buzzing pretty low and endangering the house or something, and causing the cattle and sheep to move away. So they put him on report, and he got busted from first class to second class, but they didn't take his wings away. He could still fly almost any of the aircraft that we had and deliver them. And it was really odd. As a first class, I was senior to the second class, but he was the commander of the aircraft, so he was basically, till we landed, then that made me senior, so I could get us into the first class berthing and stuff. So one of my flights was in a PBM, and there were a crew of 7 of us on that airplane. Ted Hurd was a first-class mech. We had 2 first-class pilots and co-pilot. We had a radioman, John Mimmin. He was third class. At that time, I was third class. And we picked up a plane at NARF, a new reconditioned PBM, and we flew it up to Lake Washington. And you landed in Lake Washington, and they had a buoy anchored out in the middle of the bay, and you could throttle the engines and scoot out there. And we had what they call a sea anchor. It looked like a big umbrella. It's about that big. It was folded up, and it had 2 hatches, one on each side, back in the back of almost to the tail of the aircraft. Now the PBM has no landing gear on it. It lands in the water, and you have to put the gear on and take the gear off when you pull it up on the beach. Well, we're on Lake Michigan, and we're trying to get to the buoy, and the wind is blowing like crazy, and I'm on the starboard sea anchor, and I get a radio call that says, trip the starboard sea anchor. All I had to do was pull the lanyard. You had 2 lanyards there. You'd pull one, and it would blossom out, and it was like a drag chute. It was in the water, and it would slow the airplane way down so that he could gun the engines a little bit and steer. Well, dummy me, both lanyards went in the water. So when he said, pull the lanyard, stop the sea anchor, I was struggling and everything, trying to reach that about the same time that he was getting close to the rocks, and he gunned the engine, and guess what? Out I went. I am bobbing like a cork in Lake Washington. So he's still running around up there. The guy across from me on the starboard sea, the port sea anchor, told him I was overboard. They said, that's all right. The boat will come out and get them. They sent John Memon, who was the radio man, up to walk the wing out and see if he could get the float down into the water so that they could manipulate better to get onto that buoy. Well, they had to gun the engine again, and John joined me in the water. We got 2 guys in the water now. So the tower finally called and said, get in the middle of the lake and shut down. We're sending a boat out. They picked us up out of the water because it was freezing cold, took us up, hooked onto the buoy, hooked the airplane onto the buoy, and pulled us back up onto the ramp. Well, we got on the ramp, and they had to float the gear with the wheels out to us. It's a big float tank with the tires and wheel all attached to it. We anchored, hooked it to the plane, and they pulled us up on the ramp. Well, that one worked fine. The junk airplane that we had to take back, we just swapped with them. We got in that thing. It was up on the ramp. We had to get it in the water first. We'll take the gear off of it, and we'll fly it back to San Diego. Well, I am in the bow now of the seaplane, and it's got a hatch about the size of this table. And they bring a big hawser in, and you take this hawser and put it on a snubbing post there, and that's how they towed the airplane off of the ramp into the water. Well, this guy gives me about 50 foot of this heavy line, and it's all over in my little space. And I'm thinking, I've never done this before, so I'm not sure exactly why I've got that much lead in there. And suddenly, all of this lead starts whipping out. This guy got on the tractor and was pulling that, which goes way out to the buoy, it comes back onto the bow, and that's how you manipulate this thing out there. Well, it hooked on behind my foot, and the only thing I could do was either have my leg tore off or dive through this little hatch. Well, it twisted my ankle and didn't break it, but it ejected me out of the hatch. Well, somebody that knew what they were doing jumped this guy on the tractor because he was pulling the whole airplane into the water already. And he said, nobody's on board. The pilots aren't even in the airplane. What are you doing? So they put him on a report, got rid of him. I'm limping like crazy in the airplane, but we got off, we took off. We got really bad weather from Lake Washington all down the coast. But they said San Diego was clear, so we went on. We had enough fuel in that airplane to fly for 14 hours. And they said, at some point, we'll get there. All they had to do was remember that just fly along the coast, and even if you couldn't see the coast, if you went too far out to the sea, you just turned east and you come back to the coast. Well, we got what we thought was over San Diego, and it was socked in solid. So we cruised around, and they decided after about 9 hours or 10 hours that maybe this is going to get serious. We better see if we can get down below this thing. and they went down almost to the water, and they saw that it was starting to clear up. So we went in and we made a landing in the Bay of San Diego. We didn't have any problem getting the buoy there. Towed us up on a ramp. I went over to sick bay. They took some x-rays and stuff. They wrapped it all up with a bandage and said, you'll be all right in about a month. And that kind of kept me at home base for quite a while. I was there on opening day in Vietnam and on closing day in Vietnam. And they broke Vietnam up into 5 particular periods. I have a star for each period on my Vietnam ribbons in metal. And Vietnam, when I got there, I was on the USS Coral Sea. My first visit, first sea duty was on the Bonhomme Richard, and we went to Hong Kong and Taiwan and Madras, India, and all over. So I got to see a lot of the world, the Philippines, Japan, and so forth. Did all my shopping out there. And the second cruise, that I was the first class on that cruise, and that was about 6.5 months long. The next cruise was 9 months, and that was on the Bonnie Dick the second time. And we again made the circuit out there, but we didn't go to Madras, India again. We just went to the Philippines and Japan, and we breezed between Taiwan and Korea there and went back to Japan. We spent most of our time in Japan then. Came home after 9 months, had a short period of shore duty. The sea to shore rotation is supposed to be 2 years at sea, 3 years ashore. They didn't quite follow that pattern. I got a couple of years of shore duty and popped out 3 kids before I knew what was causing it. And then I got on I was transferred to VF 173, which was back on the Bonnie Dick. And I got chasing the Bonnie Dick and only made the last part of the cruise and got back to San Diego. And while I was on that cruise, the Bonnie Dick, we went into Sasebo, which is a submarine base there, and I found out I'd made E8. And I was the youngest E8 in the Navy at the time. To be an E8, you had to have a minimum 10 years in the Navy. And to be an E9, you had, I believe, 12 years at the time. But I took the E8 exam, cooled it, and was a baby 8. That's what they called me, baby 8. That was my call sign. Call sign, everybody in the air aviation gets a call sign. So they called me baby 8. And I found out that the Coral Sea was going to go to Australia to celebrate the Battle of the Coral Sea anniversary.